Today we're going to talk about the War of 1812, often known as Mr. Madison's War, often known as the Second War for our independence. So we're going to start off with the Old Northwest Territory because we do have Native Americans out there. We do have a problem. It is a major, it's a major frontier problem / maybe foreign policy problem. So as you see, increasing number of settlers in what back then was the western U.S., it's going to lead to increased violence between natives and settlers. Once again, settlers wanting to take Native American hunting lands and all that good stuff. Tecumseh, he happens to be a Shawnee leader, and he is able to unite the natives to protect their lands in the Old Northwest Territory, the Confederacy, Northwest Confederacy. And he proves to be a very capable leader, proves to be a very charismatic leader, and he's going to go to war with a governor from Indiana, the Indiana Territory. His name's William Henry Harrison. Hold on to that name. He led the U.S. militia, and William Henry Harrison will become a future president. So. Later on. In November of 1811, the Battle of Tippecanoe occurred, and as you see, Tecumseh's brother, the Prophet, and his forces were defeated, ending his leadership of the Confederacy, the Western Confederacy. As you see, many natives, including Tecumseh, will flee to Canada for safety. Unfortunately for Tecumseh, he is going to be killed later on in the War of 1812 in Canada. I think it was Canada, but he's actually killed, I believe, in 1813, somewhere along in there. So we need to know the causes of the war. One cause you could definitely say would be the frontier with this war out there. That's why I labeled it letter A. And you could talk about the British inciting riots with the Americans, through the natives. So the Native Americans are going to lead to this war in Indiana and elsewhere, but the British are still stationed over in these western forts, so they are going to instigate the Native Americans and, basically say, yeah, they want to take your land. They want to take your land, and encourage the natives to fight the settlers, fight the Americans. So anyway, that is a problem. So here's another problem you need to know. Impressment. And keep in mind, both Britain and France were doing this. Britain definitely a lot more than France, but remember the French did this as well. So and as you see, they're fighting in Europe, so they're both impressing our sailors, Britain mainly. Britain began capturing American sailors and impressing them and forcing them to work on British ships. But both of them were doing this. Both nations were doing this. By 1807, Britain had seized more than 1,000 American ships, a lot more than France did. So there's a lot to get here. I've packed a lot in this one. Okay, so this one we've already talked about as well. Impressment, we've talked, really the first three, if you count the frontier problems, we've talked about already. But the Embargo Act, Jefferson convinced Congress to declare an embargo on all of European trade. Jefferson believed the embargo would hurt Britain, but it really hurts us, America. In 1809, Congress ends this embargo with all countries except for Britain and France. Okay, Congress in 1810 passes Macon's bill, and the bill reopens trade with both nations, but stated for the first nation to drop its trade barriers with the U.S., we would stop importing goods from the other nation. So who do you think is the first nation to drop all trade barriers with the U.S.? Correct, France. They were the first to do so, so the U.S. passed a non-importation act against Britain in March of 1811. So Britain were still embargoing. but all other European nations, including France, we're trading with. So, of course, Britain's mad about that. Here's another cause. If you didn't know this, yes, Americans, we want to take over Canada eventually. Back then, definitely. So as you see, Americans saw Canada not well defended by Britain, and they thought, hey, this is easy land we can take. Americans wanted more land and believed that people in Canada would just join the U.S. because, we share a close culture and a close history. The next cause of the war you need to know about is the Warhawks. It's a group of Republican congressmen from the South and West led by John C. Calhoun of South Carolina in the South and Henry Clay from Kentucky in the West. Both of these gentlemen want to go to war. They see that we need to go to war. And keep in mind, they're both on the same side of this issue. These gentlemen are going to come up time and time again throughout this course up until the 1850s, and for the most part they're on the opposite side of issues. But in this case, in the War of 1812, they're both Warhawks and they want war. So here's some benefits to going to war. Okay, let me go back. So here's some of the benefits. To allow reopening of trade between the U.S. and Britain, and of course all other nations. National pride. We end up taking pride in this war, and it unites us like we haven't been united in quite some time, since the American Revolution, actually. To stop the impressment of sailors, so our sailors are relatively safe in sailing the seas, and they don't have to worry about being captured by another nation. And of course, yes, we could get Canada. So, what are the drawbacks to going into this war? These you might want to know. Not everybody in the U.S. wanted to go to war. We often think that we are a united nation to go to war, but we already learned in the American Revolution only 1/3 of our population wanted to go to war with Britain, 1/3 didn't care, and 1/3 said no, we should not go to war with Britain in the first revolution, the American Revolution. In this war, a lot of people do not want to go to war. A whole section of the U.S. does not want to go to war. Military, we have a small military, small standing army. Militia was comprised mostly of our forces, and they did not like to fight outside of their state's borders. Most men did not leave within 20 miles of where they were born. So these gentlemen did not want to go to Canada. And that's going to prove to be troublesome. The Navy was quite small. We only had 22 ships. Keep in mind, Britain has over 1,000 ships in their Navy. So Britain was a superpower of their day, and they could crush us like a bug. And we could lose all the territory we had gained in the Treaty of Paris, which is like all land west of the Appalachian Mountains, and we could lose all of the Louisiana Purchase. So we actually have a lot of stuff we can lose. We actually have a lot of land we can lose in this war. And that's really a cause to pause and think a minute. So, probably need to know James Madison, father of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, and he's from Virginia, so we keep the Virginia line running here. Thomas Jefferson's from Virginia, James Madison's from Virginia. He's a Democratic Republican. Remember, he serves 8 years as Secretary of State under Thomas Jefferson. June 12th, Madison asked Congress to go for Congress to go to war, a declaration of war. The vote is split along regional lines, and I'm going to throw this in here. The main reason you're hearing that we're going to war is for impressment. There's those other reasons as well, but Britain had already outlawed impressment. They did it 3 weeks earlier in Parliament, and I think it was in June, early June, late May, and it was they had passed this act 3 weeks earlier. So why do we declare war if Britain has already done what we wanted them to do, which was stop impressment? because we have to get across, the information has to get across this pond here, and we don't have telegraph, we don't have anything modern age to do it. It was on a ship on the way over here when we declared war. By the time Madison gets the information, we had already mobilized, or we were in the midst of mobilizing, and it was too late to undeclare war. So we went on and fought a war. And as you see, the war is going to start with us invading Canada. So, how does this work out for us? We're unprepared for war. The British captured our city of Detroit. Americans failed to capture Canada. And many Native Americans helped the British because they wanted to stop Americans from taking more land. In other words, it ended up as a debacle. And we're going to be lucky to get that land back. The war at sea, the U.S. Navy was young and outnumbered. November of 1812, the British blockaded the Chesapeake and Delaware Bays, and the blockade's going to grow larger throughout the war, so most of our Navy is going to be in port for most of the war. As you see, by 1813, most of our ships were unable to leave their ports. This is one of the true fighting heroes of the War of 1812, the USS Constitution. It is still in service today. You can go and see it in Boston, and they sell it, I believe, twice a year. So you could check that video out. It's pretty interesting. As you see, here's the blockade. So we're going to fast forward. There's a lot of events happening in this war, but we're going to fast forward to 1814, the war on land. The battle for Washington. As you see, the British invaded Washington, D.C., which basically D.C. was utterly unprepared for war because Secretary of War did not believe that the British would attack Washington. He thought they were going to go to the more prosperous Baltimore. The British turned to Washington. The British soldiers burned the Capitol and the White House to the ground, and they burned many other public buildings that set Washington, D.C. ablaze. The only thing that keeps the White House from burning completely down and all these other buildings from burning completely down is the next day the British had to put up with a hurricane making a direct hit into Washington, and it forced the British to retreat. So Mother Nature stepped in and helped out there. As you see, before the British burned the White House down, Dolly Madison, this lady, she saved the famous painting of George Washington that hangs in the White House today. Also, what was saved on accident was the Declaration of Independence. It actually spent a night in Leesburg, Virginia. And it was actually just picked up along the way. They didn't even know what they'd saved. So I think it was the Undersecretary of State or something like that. So the Battle of Fort McHenry. This is when the British will come back and invade Baltimore after they raided Washington. It's better defended. The people of Baltimore hired a serviceman who served in the American Revolution, and he was really good with building defenses and getting Baltimore prepared for this battle. So the Battle of Fort McHenry. Francis Scott Key, as you see, is an American lawyer on a British ship. He saw the American flag flying over Fort McHenry after the battle the next morning, and it was a specially made flag, a big oversized flag that gentleman who defended Baltimore wanted to have specially made, so they hung it the next morning. Francis Scott Key saw it. The flag inspired Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner. He wrote the medley. The music to the Star-Spangled Banner is the same music to about 14 songs of the day. We'll pick up with the Hartford Convention on the next Screenocast, Part 2.